This is actually, okay. This is a re-upload because the original had no audio. This is the third chapter of Stamped and Racism, Antiracism, and You, and this is its chapter. A Different Atom. As I mentioned before, there we go. After Zeruda's nonsense documentation about slave trading and the savage nature of Africans, many other Europeans started to write their own testimonies and theories, but it didn't stop with just Aristotle or George Best. A century later, the tradition, one that would go on indefinitely, of writing about the African was live and well and more creative than ever. And when I say creative, I mean trash. There was a piece in 1664 by the British minister Richard Baxter called A Christian Directory. Baxter's notes state this. He believed slavery was helpful for African people. He even said that there were voluntary slaves, as in Africans who wanted to be slaves so that they could be baptized. Well, slaves? Richard Baxter was clearly out of his mind. There is also work by the great English philosopher John Locke. His notes regarding our African people. He believed that the most unblemished, purest, perfect minds belonged to whites, which basically meant that Africans had dirty brains. And by the Italian philosopher Lucido Venati, his notes state that he believed Africans were born on the different atom, and that had a different creation story. Of course, this would mean that they were a different species. It was kind of like saying, or for him proving, that Africans weren't actually human. Like they were maybe animals, or monsters, or aliens, but not human. At least not like whites, and therefore didn't have to be treated as such. This theory, which was called Polygenesis, broke the race conversation wide open. It took Zeruda's intentional beloved Western mess and put it in bold. Like Africans went from savages to savages, which revved up the necessity for Christian conversion and civilization. Pause. I know we're going on and on about the people working to justify slavery, but it's important, very important, to note that those were also people all along the way who stood up and fought against the ridiculous racist ideas of abolish ideas. In this particular case, the case of Vanity's theory of polygenesis, a group of Minorits in Germantown, Pennsylvania, rose up. The Minorits were a Christian denomination from the Germans and Dutch-speaking areas of Central Europe. During the 16th and early 17th century, Orthodox authorities were killing them for their religious beliefs. Mennonites didn't want to leave behind one place of opposition to build upon in America, so they circulated an anti-slavery petition on April 18, 1688, denouncing oppression due to skin color by equaling it with oppression due to religion. Both oppressions were wrong. This petition, the 1688 Germantown Petition against slavery, was the first piece of writing that was anti-racist among European settlers and colonists of America. But whenever people rise up against bad things tend to get worse. You know the old saying, when it gets tough, the tough get raised? They blow bubbles, actually. That's what SpongeBob tells me. Or something like that. So, all that anti-racist talk coming from the Minorits was shut down because slaveholders didn't like their businesses being talked about like it was wrong, because they needed their slaves, because their slaves made them money. It's really all quite simple. Now there's an obvious backdrop we need to discuss, the subject of our first grade color in the line cornucopia worksheets. The misinterpreted, misrepresented owners of this terrain, the Native Americans, all of this happening on their land. A land taken from them forcefully, claimed, and owned by Europeans running from their homeland, afraid of their lives. It's kind of like the kid who gets beat up every day at school, comes home crying to his mother, and then she decides to take him to a new school. And guess what he does when he gets to the new school? He pretends like he wasn't just on the receiving end of a bootsoul, and instead becomes the most annoying, tough guy in the world. And the Native Americans were sick of a tough, acting, arrogant new kid. So, fight! The Native American and the new white American beef had been brewing for over a year. But let's be honest, it had been brewing much longer than that. And when I say brewing, I mean people were dying. Bloodshed in the soil. The Protestantians in New England had already lost homes and dozens of soldiers, but eventually a man named Comet, a Native American leader, was killed because basically ended the battle in 1676. Protestantians cut up his body like savages as were hogs and paraded his remains around Plymouth. But Mennicot's tribe weren't the only indigenous people, obviously, or the only ones being attacked. Down in Virginia, a 29-year-old frontier planter, Nathaniel Bacon, let's take a time out and acknowledge the irony that there was a planter whose last name was Bacon. Bacon! Maybe he should have been a butcher. Anyway, Bacon was upset not with the race issue, but instead about the class issue. Here he was, a white laborer who had been taken advantage of by the white elite. So, what he did to disrupt the powers, that we just shift his anger from the rich whites to the Susquehannock, a tribe of natives. Yep, that's the name. Susquehannocks. This may seem like a strange move, but it was a smart play because the governor at the time, William Berkeley, was doing everything he could not to fight with the natives because it would mess up his fur trade and thus mess up his money. So attacking the natives was a way of attacking the power structure, but through the back door. As we say now, him in the pockets where it really hurts. And to there's worse, Bacon declared liberty for all servants and blacks. Because, as far as he was concerned, though they were different races, they were the same class and could united against the true enemy, rich whites. But the governor knew if blacks and whites joined forces, he'd be done. Everything would be done. It would have been an apocalypse. So he had to devise a way to turn poor whites and poor blacks against each other. And so they'd be ever be separated and willing to join hands and raise fists against the elite. And the way he did this was by creating, wait for it, white privileges. So, and keep in mind this, because, well, no black person in the entire world is ever going to go and, take a white privilege away from a white person. That's not possible. Anyway, time for a breath break. Everyone inhale. Hold it. Exhale and breathe it out. Privilege. Still here? Good. Let's move on. So, white privileges were created at this time. They included only the white rebels were pardoned. Legislators prescribed 30 lashes for any Christian, which now meant white. All whites are now wedded absolute power to abuse any African person. Those were the two most important ones. Poor whites wouldn't be punished, but they could surely do the punishing. And the third chapter.